Okay, good afternoon. This is day 101 of making videos about day or thought in the life of Schizophrenic Dominic. I make these videos to describe some amount of sanity that I have amidst the world going crazy and warring upon me, inflicting schizophrenia on me. I believe I experienced schizophrenia. I've been diagnosed with schizoid affective disorder, and I don't believe I am crazy or diseased. I believe it is a reality to be experienced. I've written a book on medium.com that I submit in chapter form there as I finish the chapters. It's about done. It's called Unveiling the Schizophrenic Tradition. In day 17 and day 45 of these videos, I discuss why I make these videos. On day 45, a 3-minute intro. And day 17, I discuss why I call myself a schizophrenic rather than targeted individual. All right. So, I took a trip to the Redwoods and I returned a couple of days ago, and it was a very good trip. It was pretty cool. We went up and saw the Skunk Train in north of Mendocino, or uh, up in Willits. We took a trip on the train, and we saw a singing conductor on the train named Malachi Schindel. He's an artist, and it was really cool to see that guy. Sometimes you run across people, and you're just like, oh, that was very refreshing to run into a person like this. And we checked out some of his art, and he's done murals with about Cesar Chavez and other murals, around the Northern California area in Ukiah and places like that. And so it was really cool to see. He sang a few train songs on the train, and we went into the Redwoods, and you got to get through Willits, which is, I don't know how else to say this, but it's not the prettiest place going in on the train, but people wave to the train, and it's really nice of them, and so that's cool going through that town, and it's like a throwback kind of town kind of thing, and uh, you go on the train and you get into the redwood forest, and you go into this little meadow that's a man-made meadow by a guy who was a lumberjack or into timber company or something, and now it's all just kind of this tourist spot for people going into the redwoods. And you can eat a lunch in this meadow at picnic tables, and they got it all set up. And then Malachi plays a flute Celtic music as you're coming out. It almost feels like you're in the Shire. It's kind of cool, so I recommend it. It was a lot of fun, and my mom and dad got me that present. And all right, so I was gonna start today. Oh, sorry. Okay, I was gonna start today talking about how in my book, A Language Older Than Words, it discusses that the breast cancer rate went from one out of 50 in 1950 to 1 out of 8 in 1998. And Derek Jensen is positing like what we're doing with plutonium potentially in our atmosphere and in our water streams and stuff, like mining plutonium and putting it into nuclear reactors and stuff and getting rid of the waste. That potentially this is, he's just pointing out as like one thing, like, how do we know that that's not causing the cancer rate to rise so heavily? And now we know that there's been like 100,000 chemicals introduced into our society since World War II. And so, this is like kind of like the thing that we don't like to talk about. And I was talking with my family member a few weeks ago, and we were talking about how, or he was talking about, or they were talking about how vaccines, like, it's one thing for RFK to be talking about vaccines. Like, now that we in California, we get like 70 injections of vaccines. And so, like, that's a little high, And so it's like, you can talk about the correlation, or you can talk about correlation. Is there causation? And, that's just one thing that we do where, potentially, uh, it's affecting us by shooting us with that much concentrated things that have chemicals and all kinds of stuff in the vaccines. And so you never know what's going on. So it's like it should be studied. Okay. Uh, then you have a situation where why does he only focus on vaccines and autism? There's so much more going on in our environment for health that potentially affects health. And I was just pointing out like this, for instance, the breast cancer or whatever, 1 in 50 in 1950 and 1 in 8 in 1998. And so it's just like he's kind of like tunnel vision on this one thing, which he may not even be right about. But it's like, okay, study that or whatever. But like it's kind of weird that he's just like hyper focused on this one aspect of existence in our society, or one aspect of environmentalism. And so we discussed that, and I was just going to share that out. And so yeah, and then I read that, and then later on I read that thing about breast cancer being 1 in 50 and then 1 in 8. Okay, in Life as No One Knows It by Sara Walker, I believe is her name. Uh, she discusses she's going over the definition of life, and there's the Darwinian definition, which seems to pertain to populations, and so she seems to posit that societies are like she contemplates that societies are self-sustaining and individuals are not. And so one of the definitions for the Darwinian definition of life is that you have to be self-sustaining and reproduce and stuff, and so, or evolve or whatever. So like life sustaining, and societies can evolve and populations can evolve, but individuals don't evolve biologically. I don't know what you evolve in your brain, so so I don't know. Uh, Anyways, so societies are potentially alive, and she goes, if individuals aren't really alive by this definition because they're not self-sustaining anymore, like you put somebody out into the wild, they're probably not going to last more than a few weeks. And are societies then alive because societies are self-sustaining and they keep people alive and they evolve and stuff? And so that was kind of an interesting thought for me to hear. And uh, I don't know. So she's gonna keep going further in that book. So I'm gonna keep reading, and I'll tell you what about it here. Okay, David A. Hughes. In the David A. Hughes book, he talks about Naomi Klein's Shock Doctrine, and there were 3 categories to Naomi Klein's Shock Doctrine: terrorizing the public, war, and financial changes. And I actually wonder if there is some sort of thing with the Pope. The new Pope was announced today in Rome, and I'll just briefly say, like, that was kind of cool to see so many people from so many countries, and they're waving their flags, and they were excited to be together and find a moral, spiritual leader. I'm not Catholic, or I'm not religious, so on the one hand, I do have like a critical view of religion and church, but at the same time, it's like it's just like anthropologically, it's just like it's just something that humans do. So as for there's good things that come out of the Catholic Church, and Pope Francis was a good force in the world. So uh, I can say that it was kind of nice to see people getting together and being excited about their leader or whatever. And in this case, I think it's a good leader for good, uh, focusing on teachings of Jesus, which are more or less pretty good. So I think so. Yeah. Anyways, the Chicago Pope was selected, and his name is Robert Prevost, I think is Prevost, and he. Uh, I was wondering if this reading the Shock Doctrine here and today, and it's kind of synchronicity, because I'm reading about the Chicago School in the Shock Doctrine, which is the school that Milton Friedman came from, and he went down to Chile, or if he exported his ideas to Chile for the Pinochet rise to power and the fascism which took hold in Chile. And here you have a pope being selected, kind of probably in response to fascism in the United States. And it makes you wonder: is it related to this? He's from Chicago, and you know about liberation theology and Oscar Romero types in Latin America that fought against fascism for a long time in Latin America, and now you see like, okay, now they're selecting this Catholic, this this Chicago Pope, and you make you wonder: is it related to the Chicago school? I'm not saying he's from the Chicago school, but Francis kind of wedded the two wings of the Catholic Church, the liberation theology, and the other wings of the church, and he had a mind for caring for the poor and the dispossessed and stuff. And so that's part of liberation theology, but at the same time he did make some critical statements about liberation theology in his time as pope, I think, or maybe I don't know if it was during this time of pope, but so like he was critical of like the church getting too involved in socialism as far as like being political, whatever. But Francis, when Jesus is political, so it's not like Francis wasn't political. I think he just kind of walks that line. He's like a politician a little bit as a religious leader. And there's like a politics to the church, which is kind of interesting to me. But anyways, so I was wondering if, you know, this pope was maybe selected as in relation to what happened in Latin America during the last several decades and stuff. So, and then what's going on in America now with like fascism. So, uh, I don't know. Maybe he's got to thread the needle for uh, the church or whatever. So, anyways, David A. Hughes points out that Naomi Klein did not say that 9/11 was manufactured, even though she talks about terror being the first category of the shock doctrine. She kind of pauses like, oh, it was like an act of God or something, according to David A. Hughes. And so, yeah, so I'm on the camp of that it was MIHOP made it happen on purpose. There's two, in one of my videos in the first few, I talk about LIHOP versus MIHOP. And LIHOP was let it happen on purpose, and MIHOP has made it happen on purpose. And David Hughes points out that or that Naomi Klein talks about there's a lot of shocking terror activity throughout the world, which results in uh, kind of a shock doctrine that follows up with like financial changes in finances in the country and war. And so there are a lot of 9/11 like events throughout the world that happen over the century of since World War II. And so, all right, I gotta stop here, but that was my 15 minutes today. That's what I was into today in my reading and stuff, and so I recommend the Skunk Train in Willits, and I would like to go back. Also, Highway 128 from Mendocino up to Mendocino from Cloverdale is also really cool. Thank you.